In a previous video, I talked about how the Rival 2 fight in the early generations of Pokémon games could destroy speedruns of those games. And they can. They are miserable fights that cause untold suffering to all the runners of those games, very consistently. In that video, I noted that the remakes generally softened the blow, and due to the various mechanical and routing changes, the fights were not as bad as in the originals. Interestingly, in the remakes of Pokémon Ruby and Sapphire, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, the developers made some mistakes, and actually ended up making one fight in particular a hell of a lot worse. It's not a rival fight, it's not even a gym fight, it's not even a boss battle. It's a random gym trainer named Black Belt Hideki. For the speedrunners of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, please remember to breathe, unclench your jaw and relax your shoulders. I'm about to dive into the detail of how Hideki has ruined days, weeks, months, and years of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire speedruns. Hideki is a trainer in Brawly's gym in Dooford Town. Importantly, Hideki is a required fight that cannot be skipped or deferred. In the original games, you could deliver the letter from Mr. Stone to Steven without using Flash, and leave Dooford Town without ever setting foot in the gym. You would have to come back before you fight Norman, as he won't battle you without 4 badges, but by then you are over-leveled and the gym poses no threat. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, you cannot deliver the letter until you defeat Brawly. You cannot leave the island without first delivering the letter. You cannot fight Brawly without first defeating Hideki. Hideki is a wall that stands between you and your Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire personal best dreams. A simple but terrifyingly strong threat that will crush you indiscriminately. Let's look at what makes Hideki such a menace. Hideki has a singular Machop. I've been killed by my fair share of Machops over the years. They can certainly pack a punch with a same type attack bonus critical hit karate chop, but usually not enough to stop a speedrun cold in its tracks. This particular Machop has foresight, low sweep, and focus energy. Like so many fights in Pokemon speedruns, but unusually for a later game, a programming error makes this fight much worse than it was actually intended to be. You see, Pokemon have these things called individual values that help determine their stats, the other variables being effort values and natures. Individual values range from 0 to 31, meaning 31 individual values in speed would give your Pokemon a very good speed stat, and 0 individual values would give your Pokemon a very bad speed stat. In Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, these values are fixed, meaning they won't vary between different save files. All of the Pokemon in the game have straight IVs, meaning that they are the same for each stat. Speed is 15, special attack is 15, so on and so forth. The intended IVs for Hideki's Machop are meant to be something like 15 across the board, very average. However, the game interprets the numbers incorrectly, and for programming reasons I am not intelligent or mathematically literate enough to understand, the Machop has IVs that are closer to 28, 3 shy of the maximum. Essentially, the developers accidentally made this the most jacked Machop of all time, and every time you fight Hideki, he is always sending out the most jacked Machop of all time. This programming error is a large part of why the Hideki fight is so bad, as a less jacked Machop would not be nearly as much of a threat. The player strategy for this fight is simple. Use Echoed Voice. Echoed Voice is a normal type special move, with 40 power and 100% accuracy. If you use Echoed Voice consecutively, it gains 40 power each turn. So first turn it is 40 power, the next it is 80, the next 120, up to a maximum of 200 power. Most runnable mudkips will down the Machop in 3 Echoed Voices, others may take 4. So you need to live at least 3 turns in order to win. Simple enough, I suppose. As I just mentioned, the run uses Mudkip, which is still a Mudkip at this point in time, at about level 13, assuming you didn't get any extra experience points. The Mudkips are variable in their stats too, as RNG manipulation for starter stats is not possible in Generation 6. So instead you have a threshold for stats required to be a runnable Mudkip. No matter how good your Mudkip is, you are likely to have a very bad time on this fight. In the ideal fight, Machop uses Foresight and Focus Energy, then either of these moves again so you have time to ramp up Echoed Voice's power. You do not, under any circumstances, want to see Low Sweep, Machop's lone damage dealing move. Low Sweep is 65 base power in Generation 6, and lowers your speed stat by 1 stage. In almost all cases, one Low Sweep will always mean attacking after the Machop. Also, one Low Sweep without a critical hit will deal between 35 and 45% of your health, so you do not want to be taking hits at all. At its lowest damage output, Machop can kill you in 4 hits. With a low defense Mudkip and a high roll crit, a single Low Sweep could one-hit KO you. Basically, if the Machop decides to attack you 3 turns in a row, you will die. Let's talk about critical hits. In my experience, the Machop commonly opens with Focus Energy, which raises the critical hit ratio. It doesn't have to do this, and theoretically it could use Foresight 3 times, but I've never seen it. From Generation 3 onwards, Focus Energy raises the critical hit ratio by 2 stages, so that it is a 50% chance to critical hit. This is lethal. A crit in the worst case can one-hit KO you, and at best drain most of your HP. A quick note about damage rolls. Damage rolls are a way for the games to calculate a random element to damage. When you attack, the game calculates this damage, then rolls a randomly generated number between 85 and 100. This is the roll calculation. What this means is that the damage you deal can be 85% of the maximum damage. A low roll would be when the random number is closer to 85, and a high roll would have the number something closer to 100. This is important for understanding the Hideki fight. A high roll crit from Machop will kill you. A low roll crit from Machop will take most of your HP. A high roll non-crit could do over half of your HP. The root cause of Hideki's morally blind terror is that this Machop is just dummy strong, and knows not the extent of its mighty powers. Healing will not save you. The route does not buy super potions, as they are not easily accessible with only 1 badge, so you're stuck with regular 20 HP supplying potions that are insufficient for recovering the untold damage of a low sweep critical hit. With all but the bulkiest of Mudkips, a low sweep critical hit from this Machop will always do over half your measly HP. Also, it is totally plausible to heal a crit, then get crit again, back to square -1. To make the point of how often Hideki does something horrible, I ran the fight 50 times. Not a statistically significant sample size, sure, but more often than most people probably run through Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. In those 50 fights, I lost 30 times and won 20 times. That's a 60% loss rate against Hideki. Now, maybe I'm horribly unlucky, or my Mudkip was excessively bad, or just plain I suck somehow, but to me that's absolutely insane. I can't think of another fight where the strategy is just attack as fast as you can and don't get crit, and the loss rate is still 60% by my crude estimation. There's no need to set up, or to wait for an opportune move, or even to use a complicated strategy. You just got to attack 3 times and hope you don't get killed first. Hideki is a run killer through and through, thanks to his unbelievably meaty Machop and a 50% chance for critical hits. I want to emphasize here that Hideki is not meant to be a difficult trainer fight. He's literally meant to be a warm-up fight to the actual boss that immediately follows him. But somehow, the developers accidentally messed up the IV calculations and gave this Machop a lethal combination of moves. Focus Energy crits might not be as bad if the Machop didn't also have Low Sweep, which when powered up with the same type attack bonus, is base 97.5 power. That is an absurdly strong attack for a level 14 Pokemon. Also of interest to me is that Hideki is a horrible fight in both Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. For those not familiar with the two runs, for the most part, Omega Ruby is considered the better run in terms of luck and time, due to the different Pokemon in Team Aqua and Magma, and being able to use Latios instead of Latias, among some other things. Other people have made this point in more detail in other videos, and I'll link those below. But common to both runs is Hideki, the powerful man who indiscriminately slaughters Mudkips no matter what game he resides in. Even if Alpha Sapphire is worse overall, they are bonded together by Hideki's nothing personal kid type assassinations. To make matters worse, the Hideki fight is sandwiched between two other bad fights that are bad for a bunch of other reasons. The fight prior is a meta type that has Meditate, Endure, and Confusion. It's not really too bad, but Confusion is the enemy of a swift and successful Pokemon speedrun. The fight afterwards is Brawly, the gym leader. At least in Brawly's case, the fight is meant to be difficult. It's a boss battle. However, coming immediately after Hideki is rough, and Brawly is hardly a pushover. Brawly has a Machop and a Makuhita. The Machop thankfully has neither Focus Energy nor Low Sweep, but it does have Bulk Up and Karate Chop, which means the crits can really hurt. The Makuhita is tough as well, with Bulk Up, Sand Attack, and Arm Thrust. Both are higher or equal level to your Mudkip. A bulked up Arm Thrust that hits 5 times will deal most, if not all, of your HP, and Sand Attack is always a problem for not being completely tense while you're trying to feint it. Brawly is harsh, and you have to fight him immediately after the trauma of Hideki. It is just so tough. Lastly, for those wondering, Hideki or anything like him does not exist in the original Ruby and Sapphire. As I mentioned earlier, you skip over this gym and come back when you are overleveled. But even then, there is no low sweep, uber buff Machop to speak of here, so the threat just isn't there. Hideki can't hurt you in Ruby and Sapphire. That's all I have, folks. Tell me, did you ever get walled by Hideki in a run or a casual playthrough? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.